Hi, everybody. Welcome back. By now, you all should know who I am, Dr. Judy Morgan. I'm your host, whatever. I'm the person running this thing. Well, actually, my daughter's running it. I'm just a face. We're going to continue on with yet another amazing person, Dr. Dee Blanco, who is a veterinarian and she's a homeopath, which if you heard me in the beginning, I don't do that stuff. Like I know about this much about it. And I decided when I started studying, it was way over my head. It was going to take way too long to learn it.
I could say the same thing about Chinese medicine.
Well, there you go. Well, you know, it is one of those things you have to see what speaks to you as a practitioner. Right. And Chinese medicine just like really hit my hot button, and the food therapy, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. Right. I love this. So, and that's, you know, kind of what makes the world go round. Unfortunately for pet owners, they have to find their own homeopath, and they have to find their acupuncturist. They need to find their food therapist. They need to find their, you know, their holistic vet who's going to oversee everything. So yeah, you need lots of people.
A team.
So, but the good news, we have Dee on our team this afternoon. So there may be one or two people that are out there who are not familiar with homeopathy. So do you want to give us a little rundown about what it is and how you use it?
Yeah. First off, Judy, thank you so much for inviting me. This is really fun. I love it. I love talking with you anyway. We just hit it off all the time. But anyway, this is great to be on your summit. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I always love the opportunity to talk about homeopathy. So it's a system of energetic medicine, much like acupuncture. It works at the level of what we call the vital force, which is a lot like the prana or the chi in Oriental medicine. And so it stimulates the body's healing response. It is not a physical substance, it's an energetic substance, and it stimulates the healing response, which everybody has, but most people forget. Most people forget that we have this, that this was given to us by creation. We all have it. It's what keeps us alive. It keeps us going. It keeps us healed. And if we stimulate that with needles or with any other kind of machine that works at the energetic level, homeopathy, then the body knows how to heal itself. So it's a 200-year-old, nothing like Oriental medicine, but it is a powerful medicine that it's not herbology. A lot of people get it mixed up with herbs. It's not that. But a lot of the medicines do come from plant material. They come from plants. Some of them come from animals, like apis comes from the honeybee. Some of them come from animal substances like lachesis, which comes from the venom of a bushmaster snake. And a lot of them come from minerals as well. But as homeopathy grows, the actual pharmacopoeia, the remedies that are used grows and grows and grows. So there are many remedies, thousands of remedies out there that can be used. I don't use thousands of them, but you know.
Someone gave me a homeopathic remedy kit once. And so, you know, I opened up this thing and there were hundreds of little dark bottles with little BBs in them. And I just went, whoa,
well, you're lucky. You are lucky because that is a rare animal right now. There's only a couple of pharmacies right now that are making them. I'm out of stock and they're having a hard time keeping up since COVID. So, and I think what's happening in COVID, people are wanting to take their own care in their hands. And so they're stocking up on things that they should have. So make sure you put that in your will. These will last for lifetime, seriously. And hang on to it. It's a rarity. So.
Well, sadly, I don't have it anymore, but if I did, I would send it out to you had I known.
I would have taken it. I would have. Anyway.
Bummer. Oh, well. Okay. So how now you're not in clinical practice.
No, I do consulting with people.
So you do online consulting, Zoom call, kind of like what I've been doing. So, what kind of information do you need from someone in order to determine a homeopathic remedy? Like I know it's not just, hey, hi doc, my dog's got some itchy skin and I think he's got yeast between his toes, you know, what you got. It's a lot more involved, right?
It is just like when we're doing an oriental diagnosis. I mean, obviously right then I can't see the tongue and I can't feel the pulses, but I use everything else I can that I learned in oriental medicine, because I am kind of a little bit of a mixed breed. I do use some of those things that you're really good at. But I have a 3-page health questionnaire. So I want to know everything about the past medical history. I want to know what medicines they're on, or what medicines they might have been on, what kinds of things they're currently on. I want to know about their vaccine history. That's very important to me. But I also want to know a lot about their personality. So I don't want to know just that they're afraid. I want to know specifically, what are they afraid of? I want to know what their thirst is. Is it a lot at one time? Do they rarely drink? Is it a little bit all the time? I want to know what their temperature preferences are. I want to know what they like to eat, what they don't like to eat. Do they eat just in the morning or just in the evening? I want to know what their bowel movements are like and their urination. Those bowel movements are so important there, right? Because
it's one of the things on my questionnaire. What's the poop?
Right? What's the poop? Give us the poop. And then what's going on with the condition? And is there anything that changes that condition? Or is there what we call modalities? Is that condition worse at any time of the day? Is the coughing only at night, only when they're laying down, only when they're running, only when they're, I don't know, excited about another dog, whatever. There's all those very, very specific things that you would never get in allopathic medicine. It's a cough, okay, we give the same medication, maybe
Exactly.
1 or 2 or 3. But as holistic practitioners, we really want to know what that whole being is going through right now. The time of the day, as you know, the seasons are important. All of these, it's amazing with homeopathy, just like with oriental medicine. You know, if it's a human, you can ask, what are the sensations? What does that chest feel like when you're coughing? Do you have to hold yourself? Do you have to, otherwise it hurts so bad. So you and I, as animal pediatricians, so to speak, we have to intuit a lot, but we have to try to drill down on how to ask those questions so that we can, and sometimes my clients will do Zoom or we'll get a video, so that can help. But we try to drill down on how do they look like, when they cough, where is it the worst? Or are they just so still that they don't want to cough because it hurts so bad? That narrows down. Then I'll verify the remedy I'm thinking right there. I'm thinking bryonia, and I'll verify it with other modalities or other symptoms that I know happen with bryonia. You see, so when I go to human conferences or I study with human holistic or homeopaths, it's so easy that humans give you all this information. Of course, a lot of times it's too much, but a lot of times they'll just give you something, you go, okay, well, of course, that's it. With animals, it's, you know, it's a completely different experience. And then because you and I, but we have so many years experience, you know, that we can actually do telemedicine consults. Other people, I don't think can. They're not comfortable with that, but we've had our hands on a lot of animals.
And you know, the questionnaire is great because I've got a lot of the same types of questions. We should probably exchange questionnaires and see.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Yeah.
But then since I've been doing, I used to do them all just by phone, and since COVID, I figured out how to use them for Zoom finally, because Zoom was forced on me for a lot of other things as well. So I figured out how to do it, and it's really interesting. And when people just start talking about their animals, they'll say something that they think is not important, and all of a sudden you go, oh, light bulb. Like, yes,
Right.
yes, that
Right.
was critically important. Thank you so much. I just changed my whole diagnosis based on that one little
Okay.
statement when I just asked you to tell me about your pet, and you gave me that answer. And somebody asked if this could be used on cats. Yes, this can be used on any animal and human. So homeopathy is pretty cool. Are there any dangers with homeopathy? Like, can you make an animal worse if you gave the wrong remedy?
Well, sure, because homeopathy can be curative, it can be palliative, and it can be suppressive. So if you're treating an animal that has a lot of chronic ailments, and say, for example, they have this really bad cough. Say, for example, maybe there've been a whole bunch of allopathic medications given, and you give a medication that actually brings out the symptoms again because they've been so suppressed. That can look like the animal is going to die. It could even stress it enough that they could get really sick again. You have to be very careful. I know the mindset is that they're over the counter and they're not going to hurt, and most of the time, especially the low potencies you can get over the counter, that is true, but it is not across the board, especially with older animals or animals that have a lot of chronic disease. You have to be careful with that.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, can you use acupuncture and homeopathy at the same time?
Yeah, that's always a big question. Now, when I was doing more acupuncture, I used it very specifically, like a few needles, maybe just to help them feel better, or just a few for their hips or something like that. But I knew that I was not a really holistic acupuncturist, but I was a holistic homeopath. So when I'm using a constitutional remedy that is really for body, mind, spirit, then I could use that in a way that I could use acupuncture in a way that I knew was just kind of palliative, just to help them feel a little better right at that moment. But typically we don't like to do that because what I've seen happen in my practice when somebody was going to an acupuncturist and a homeopath, if a symptom came out while you're under homeopathic treatment, a lot of times something will come out and I'm doing the happy dance because that's been something lurking in the back or that was suppressed. And the acupuncturist did acupuncture to try to stop that symptom. So you see, they can counteract to each other. And unless you kind of really know how to work with those together, we usually say don't do that. Chiropractic is different. Chiropractic and homeopathy seem to blend quite beautifully together.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's much.
They're all energetic medicines, but the chiropractic is opening up the blood flow and the nerve flow to actually really help with the body with healing. So that kind of goes along with the homeopathic remedies. So is there a group of conditions that are the most common that you treat, or is it pretty much for anything?
Pretty much for anything. I mean, there are things I know that, just not going to be cured because it's so far along, and it's better just to keep the animal on anything that's making him comfortable. You can still use homeopathy in those kind of conditions. Often, say, for example, an animal is close to dying, you can still use homeopathy to kind of calm even help them die. If they're nervous and agitated, often you can use homeopathy. If an animal, say, has cancer, you can use homeopathy just for pain control. You might not want to give up your other pain meds, but often it will help. But pretty much everything, diarrhea, vomiting, eye ulcers, hair loss, skin conditions. Oh, those are so tricky. Aren't those fun?
Don't we all just want to say itchy, scaly, yeasty dogs and cats? And I don't see near as many allergy cats, but when you get one, man, they're bad.
They're bad, and they're really suffering, aren't they? It's really
kitty cats are a lot trickier, and I find it more difficult to treat cats because getting them to take herbs is not so much fun. They're pretty good with acupuncture.
That's
diet changes.
I know. And that's one of the reasons I really gravitated to homeopathy, because I was taking my training at the same time, basically. But homeopathy was one that grabbed me before acupuncture. And I said, there's no way I'm going to get these herbs down cats. It's just not going to happen. But homeopathy is really easy. You can put in a little bit of milk, or if you have a dropper bottle, you can just mix it up in a little bit of water. And if you can get it into their mouth, but you can put it in their water, you can dose easily because it basically is tasteless. So that's an easy thing. Other things are changing their diet. Not so much.
I know people are like, why don't you write cat cookbooks? I'm like, I'll write it. They won't eat it. It's really difficult.
Exactly.
Even my own cats, they're like, no.
Are you kidding, Mom?
They're not small dogs. That's all I ever say. They're not small dogs. All right. So I know one of the big questions that people wrote in even before as soon as I said we were going to have a homeopath on board, people were like, oh, well, everybody wants to know, what do we do about vaccines? Is there a way to get around having to give vaccines? Is there a way to detox them after vaccination? Like, because over vaccination is a critical problem, I think, for our animals. And unfortunately, if you get a rescue animal, they're going to come, depending on which rescue or shelter they come through, they're going to get loaded up with all kinds of toxins before they get out of there, most likely. You're either going to get the rescue that does nothing, or you're going to get the one that gives them every single vaccine in one day, plus some flea and tick preventative, some heartworm preventative. And they're
spayed or neutered.
Right. And it's all like on the same day, and they're dewormed, and it's just like this toxic nightmare for these animals. And then sometimes you try to get a puppy or a kitten from a breeder who either doesn't vaccinate or is vaccine light, but that doesn't always happen. And now then you go to the veterinarian, and your veterinarian says, oh, we need a series of 3 or maybe 4 puppy shots, kitten shots, whatever. So what are the ways around that?
Oh my God. Well, what you just described with the shelters, I call it the veterinary assault, because here these poor animals are homeless, taken off the street when really they should just be, right? They'd be better off on the street, right? I mean, and they're assaulted from day one. Really, I mean, I have a whole, that drives me nuts. And then these lovely people who adopt them thinking they're, going to get their now forever home for this lovely creature. And then they have to spend a lot of money paying you and I to try to unravel this toxic mess. So I'm right there with you, Judy. And then the rescues themselves, sometimes they're just as bad as the shelters, right?
Well, I think they think that they're doing the right thing, and that they're trying to do right by these animals.
Right.
But unfortunately, until we can re-educate them,
that's the key.
Hey, we can't do it this way. I mean, some of the Cavalier rescues, because I've done so much with Cavalier rescue, a lot of them, I've got them now doing titers, and I've got them doing stool samples before they deworm them. And so we've, but it literally is one rescue at a time, one group at a time. And it's hard with shelter medicine. The shelter medicine veterinarians, they're dealing with, parvo and distemper and upper respiratory outbreaks all the time. So I get where they're coming from, but it is difficult. So let's say
that's where we could use the homeopathics.
Yeah. So let's say somebody is getting a new animal, and they're lucky enough to get it with no vaccines on board, but they're a little nervous that, well, now I can't take them to the park because there might be some parvo there, or I can't, take them with me when I want to go do something. What can they do?
They can use homeopathic nosodes if they feel that's something they want to do. And I mean, the nosodes are fantastic. And I wish more shelters would, consult with us on these things, because it would save a lot of suffering for everybody. And they're so cheap. But, basically the nosodes, and I know it's a weird word if you're not used to it, it's Nosode. But the nosodes have been used for over 200 years. The homeopaths know a lot about using nosodes from the time of the inception of homeopathy. And they've been used in many, many epidemics for humans, everything from, just thousands and thousands and thousands of doses, and millions of people use. There's homeopaths now, of course, that are using COVID nosodes around the world.
Really?
And they can provide incredible protection. I'm not just saying, just like 50% protection, but I mean, massive protection. And I could go into more human details, but I do have, probably we don't want to get into the human side of it too much, but I do have, I think, a blog on my website that's Epidemics, Homeopathy for Epidemics. But the nosodes, that's what we typically use. The nosodes are prepared from, typically substances from a diseased person. So in parvo, it would be from fecal material from a dog that was diagnosed with parvo. For a dog with distemper, it would be some oral discharge or some eye discharge, maybe some sputum from the cough. And of course, these are prepared in the same homeopathic way. All homeopathy is prepared, sterilized and diluted and succussed. So there's no physical substance in there. The same thing is true with kennel cough. And you know, kennel cough is a combination of a whole bunch of things, but it's prepared for dogs that had the laryngeal trachea bronchitis. And then, so what we do is we give these nosodes, they work best at the time of exposure. So if you say you have a young puppy, you were lucky enough to not get one that was vaccinated, and sometimes you have to beg the breeders not to vaccinate them, then you can start right away, because when mama's antibodies wear off, that's when they're a little more vulnerable until they hit puberty. And when puberty hits, that immune system is supercharged, right? That's when, you know, the world says, you're an adult, you got to be on your own. And every day that you get older, you develop more immune capacity. So the nosodes fill a susceptibility. And that susceptibility, every one of us has susceptibility because we have chronic disease. We're born with chronic disease. And that is like I think of it like a vessel that is our susceptibility. We're susceptible to malaria, to polio, to influenza. Dogs are susceptible to distemper, parvo, cats, panleukopenia. This susceptibility is basically filled by this energetic called a nosode. And when you fill that susceptibility, then if you're exposed to a dog with parvo or distemper, whatever, then there's nothing that can get in. And vaccines are very crude homeopathy, because you're giving the actual virus in there and you're making the body sick in order to prepare you or prevent the next infection. And why that's crude is this: as a holistic practitioner and Oriental medicine training, we know that the terrain is the important thing, right? That we fortify the terrain, and then you're going to be more resistant and more resilient. But if you're making the body sick to prepare it to be resistant, it's not as good as making the body healthier, right? Clean food, clean water, clean air. So if you give a regular vaccine, you're asking the body basically to stay in a low-level form of parvo, a low-level form of distemper, a low-level form of rabies, yada, yada, yada. As long as you're in those low-level forms of illness, you're not going to be in a high-level state of health. And that sets up chronic disease right there. So these young dogs are getting that kind of an assault initial 6 weeks or 8 weeks into their lives, which is really sad, because every generation gets sicker and sicker, right? It's like I call it the patchwork quilt, where it just builds, you know, with each generation.
So is the nosode a one dose deal? Is it a one-time thing?
Well, not quite. Not quite, but you use it when you're the most susceptible. Really, for dogs, in most situations, I use just parvo, because we don't see much distemper anymore. If animals are in a shelter situation, I would say we'd use distemper and parvo. And nosodes have been used in shelter situations in our lifetime. I know people who have used them. So, but if they're used, we just use them. It's very simple. It's just liquid dosing, and you just give it once a day for a week. In my protocol, once a day for a week, once a week for a month, and then a couple times a month until they're somewhere around a year old. Sometimes people say they're so good. They're so healthy. And frankly, I don't think you should. If you're on a natural rearing program, I don't think you need anything, period. Not even nosodes. But all those other things that you and I recommend to people to do, right? All of those other ways we can support them. Even still getting acupuncture to support their constitution, or herbal preparations. Certainly all the goodies in your books, you know, reading those great recipes. All of those ways are going to still support the body. But say like you're going to travel with your dog, this is where people get the worry, or I'm going to go to a dog show or something like that, and they want to use a parvo nosode, then you use it right at the time of exposure. Kennel Cough goes around some of the daycare centers around here. It's always one or two. It's never all of them.
Right.
And then I have people use the Kennel Cough nosode. And I've even had Kennel Cough owners of those daycare centers, they'll give it to the dogs and boom, it's gone. So, I mean, we have great history. Chris Day in England, I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Day. He's a wonderful homeopath. He's a holistic, he does acupuncture too. And he's an elder gentleman now. I'm not sure how much he's practicing, but he's a brilliant, brilliant veterinarian. He did a fantastic study some years ago, I think it was in 1987, and he took about 241 dogs in a kennel because he was able to control this. And he gave nosodes to all of the dogs, 214 of them, and 64 of them were vaccinated. 150, I'm looking at my notes because I always forget the numbers, 150 of them were not vaccinated. So he gave the homeopathic kennel cough, and it was going around. It was bad in this kennel. And it was the summertime, and you know how things are. He said that 5% of the vaccinated dogs got kennel cough, 0% of the unvaccinated. So really that moral of that story is the vaccines actually interfered with the kennel cough nosode protecting them. Right. And also, you know, the other moral is that nosodes work. And I've been using them in my practice about 35 years, and they work beautifully. They really work. So anyway, it's a great option.
Okay, which is great. So, so if somebody, let's say somebody wanted to get parvo nosodes or distemper nosodes, are they on Amazon? Like, where do you get
them? Yeah, right. They shouldn't be, but who knows? They are a prescription, so that you need to get them through a holistic veterinarian, a homeopath primarily, but they're not difficult.
Is there a list somewhere? Like, I know we have the AHVMA .org website where you can find holistic practitioners, but is there a specific homeopathic veterinary?
Yes, there is. It's called the AVH, Academy of Veterinary Homeopathy.
Is that a .com?
.org. Mm-hmm.
.org.
And then, yeah, and the other place is drpicarin.com.
Okay.
And he was my first veterinary teacher, and of course his book is, you know, equally as good as yours. And anyway, so that's a great book because it's more focused towards homeopathy because he's a homeopath.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had all of his tapes and lecture notes that a client gave me because she had done his entire course, and that's what did me in, because it was still on like little cassette tapes, and there were hundreds of them. I'm like, I have to listen to all these.
Yes, you do.
I will be ancient when I figure this out. So I said, I'm not doing that. All right. So now we know we can use nosodes instead of vaccines if we can find a homeopathic veterinarian to work with. Let's say now I've got this poor animal, cat, dog, whatever, that I just adopted, and it came with buku vaccines on board and all this other stuff. How do I detox them?
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that, you know.
That's all everybody asks me. I'm like,
I know. Yeah, it's the $64,000 question. And it's no different in humans either. You know, the first thing we've got to try to do is eliminate all that, you know, because taking the poison out of the person is much more difficult than keeping the poison out of the person, right? So it's tricky. So a lot of people just immediately, it's, you know, going around, and I think we're kind of at fault because we started doing this years ago, saying, yeah, you can use thuya, yeah, you can use silica, even sulfur. And those are great remedies for helping clear vaccines. And so maybe if you know nothing else, you could use thuya, you could use silica, maybe sulfur. And those are fantastic. Those are incredible remedies. But it's not a one size fits all, you know, and I do so much detox in my practice. I've studied so much in the sort of functional medicine way that my experience tells me that you have to, homeopathy is really great at stimulating the vital force. So then it stimulates the body to help detox all of those. There's heavy metals, there's, you know, there's mercury, there's aluminum, there's formaldehyde. And then we've got, of course, foreign DNA. Then we've got MSG, then we've got sodium borate, not borate, Yes. And we've got tween. I mean, there's so many, I've done a whole lecture just on what's in a vaccine. And so the body is overwhelmed with those things, but the most toxic ones are, of course, the formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen, and then the two heavy metals. So taking those out of the body, I mean, that's an overload. If you stimulate the body's detox mechanisms, then I believe that you also got to help it to grab a hold of those and take it out, either the poop chute or to urinate it out, right? Because otherwise it just keeps cycling around. That enterohepatic circulation that we know about keeps going in the liver. Or the other tragic thing is that blood-brain barrier is still open when they're babies. So if you're vaccinating them at 8 weeks old, that thing is still, that blood-brain barrier, which is supposed to keep out a whole lot of toxins, is still open. And Judy, I actually think that part of the reason we are seeing so much aggression, aren't you? And so much seizures. I'm seeing seizures every week. I've never seen this many.
Well, I blame isoxazolines for that a lot, but
yeah, that too. All of these things. And you know, there's so many things that these poor little animals, then this creates inflammation in the brain, right? Because those two heavy metals in particular are serious neurotoxins by themselves, but together they're really a nuclear bomb.
You know what I am seeing a lot of and getting a lot of reports of is meningoencephalitis. Like,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
it's not viral, it's not infectious. We just have an inflammatory meningoencephalitis. And a lot of these dogs have not had, it tends to be the small breeds, and a lot of them have not had chemicals, but they have had vaccines.
Yep, exactly. I just had one like that this week. They did a CSF tap, the whole thing. They couldn't find a reason for it.
Yeah, it seems to be the new soup du jour.
I think so. This is what I call brain on fire.
Yeah.
Because they can't really handle all of that. So that's why it's not just, oh, I got to give silica, or, oh, I give a dose of Thuya and I'm okay, I can give the vaccines. Please, please, please do not be thinking that, because this is the reason I have so much gray hair. And right, we work really hard to help these little guys, and it's not that easy.
So do you have an answer? You're getting asked the same thing that I've always gotten asked. How do you get away with not giving them a rabies vaccine?
Yeah, well, titers for one thing. But originally,
the problem is a lot of states and municipalities won't accept them for licensing. So I mean, I just tell people, you're kind of stuck with what you're stuck with. Get around it if you can. Some states will allow exemptions if they have a medical issue, and that's up to the veterinarian to determine if they have a medical issue. It was interesting because being a holistic veterinarian, when I was in my practice, people would come to me all the time and say, I want a rabies exemption. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the animal. Let's look at his history. Sorry, he's healthy. I can't write that. And it puts the veterinarian in a bad box, because if I write exemptions for every animal that walks in the practice, the state's going to come after me and say, you can't do that. And that's, say bye to your license. But I mean, I was pretty open to, oh, he's got severe allergies. That's not a healthy dog.
Right. Exactly.
He has seizures. That's not healthy. He's got cancer. That's not healthy. No. But if they've never really had anything wrong, it's really hard to get around it.
It is really hard. Yeah. And so really, we have to have the pet parents have to get really active on this, because we need to change this. This is criminal in my mind. And, those duration of immunity studies are out there in Europe. It's different here. And we know darn good and well that these vaccines, you've tested animals, probably your own animals, for, I've seen it in my 16-year-old dog still showing titers.
Oh yeah.
This is absolutely criminal. And using even low doses, very, very minor doses, still create most antibody reactions if you're using antibodies as the parameter. And right now, that's what we're using, because that's the only thing. We're not measuring cell-mediated immunity, right?
Right. And until somebody figures out how we can do that.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody thinks that their animal is having an adverse reaction, and I'm not talking about an immediate allergic reaction, but we're a few weeks out from vaccination, or we're even a year out from vaccination, and you're going, he just hasn't been right ever since he got that bunch of vaccines 6 months ago. If someone worked with a homeopath, my assumption would be, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, my assumption would be that you would ask your 5 million questions to try to determine a more specific remedy just than silica.
Right.
And it might be a combination of a couple of things, but you need to really hone down what the symptoms are.
That's right. Yep, you have to. And that's why it's not just as easy as people say, well, I'll just get the dog vaccinated and then I'll just give Thuya. And it's easy right after that. Or I'll use homeopathic listen, which is homeopathic rabies, after they got a rabies vaccine. It's not that easy, unfortunately. But
so it's not that easy. But let's say someone, they've got to get their rabies vaccine.
Right.
They're up against a wall. Are they better off going ahead and giving that? Listen.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, now you still have to get that from a holistic veterinarian because that's a prescription. You can't get listen over the counter. But I also would load them up ahead of time on some of these antioxidants, really great antioxidants. I'd make sure that their liver was functioning really well, that they were having bowel movements minimum once a day, at least once a day. I'd make sure that, the food was as clean as possible, that they were getting lots of minerals, because those minerals are the cofactors for a lot of the detox mechanisms. So in other words, I'd get the liver functioning as good as I could. I'd make sure there was something simple, even like chlorella every day without food in the diet. And then I would use things, whatever you can, if you can use Thuya, if you read about Thuya and you think that works, that's great. I'd use it the day of the vaccine, and I'd use it for at least a few days after the vaccine. And the same thing for listen, for rabies, I'd use it the day of, and I'd use it for a few days afterwards. And you might need more down the road, but that's at least a start. And so at least it's something. But I'd beg, borrow, steal, whatever I would to protect my animal, frankly, whatever that means.
Yeah. And so if you want a good recipe for, while we're talking about this, for detoxing the liver, if they're going to get a vaccine, there is a liver draining diet in the Yin and Yang book, which would be really good to use in that time period surrounding the vaccination, so that we are cleansing that liver and getting things moving on out of there.
Yeah, perfect. Great plan. I'm going to attach your recipe to my protocol.
There you go. Great. Perfect. I think that's the one that has a bunch of gizzards in it. So gizzards have been a little tricky during COVID, but I got people like begging and borrowing to get those.
Oh my God.
You got to make friends with your local butcher or the butcher behind the grocery store counter and say, hey, I want all those. Most people aren't looking for them. So, don't tell your friends. Okay. All right. How about 5 easy things to remove from your pet's environment that are toxic? Because you also do functional medicine and some other things that are really cool, and we certainly should take advantage of that too.
Well, yeah. And can I go back to something about the vaccines?
Absolutely.
Just quickly. You and I could talk about this for at least an hour. But just to remind people, if your animal did get the parvo distemper, combo wombo, even Lyme, and now they're adding corona in there, right? Whatever the corona is. Years ago, it used to be, we would say corona was a vaccine looking for an illness. Yeah. Right? It was like a nothing, now I don't know. Are they using that same one to say that that's what corona is?
I have no idea.
Different? Yeah, I don't know.
I did see an article the other day, and I think it was in Europe, where they're talking about making a corona vaccine for dogs.
Yeah. So, but I've seen veterinarians using it here. I just didn't know what they were using.
Maybe they must be using the old corona vaccine.
Old corona, right?
Which is for yellow diarrhea. It's
exactly.
not for...
I know, exactly.
So anyway, like the FIP vaccine worked so well for cats, which is coronavirus. It did.
it didn't do anything. But anyway, I'm sorry to leave the
That's fine.
the question you had. The reason I wanted to say that is just to make sure that once your animal has been vaccinated past 16 weeks old, you never need any of those again. Those are all, first off, they're puppy diseases, right? Or kitty
Right.
diseases. And those modified live vaccines last a lifetime. So just forget about that. The only thing you have to worry about is your legal requirement, quote unquote, not laws that don't reflect the science, or really, I don't think, humanity, but that rabies is the only one. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you're going to boarding, daycare, grooming, and they're requiring a laundry list of vaccinations,
Right.
you need to educate them or find somewhere else.
That's right.
You
right.
really need, and where my practices were located in Southern New Jersey, over the past 30 years, we pretty much educated all the groomers, daycare centers, boarding facilities that, look, this is what you're going to get from people coming from our practice. You are not going to get a laundry list of vaccines. You're going to get some titers, and you're going to get healthy animals coming in there, and they better come out healthy.
Right.
So.
Right. Exactly. That's beautiful. That's good that you did that. That's awesome.
Somebody says, what about the vaccine for rat urine in New York City? So that would be lepto. I am not a fan of that vaccine. Hate it. Is there a nosode for that?
Yeah, you can get, and you can get a nosode for Lyme. You can get a nosode for pretty much anything.
Cool.
Now, sometimes we use the nosodes. They're called actually tautodes, and they're made from the vaccines. And a lot of human practitioners use them also for children after vaccinations. So that's a slightly different thing. So you're giving the energy of that vaccine. Now, you don't always know what vaccine that homeopathic pharmacy has, because, there's a million vaccines out there. And so sometimes they're not as effective as I think they should be in theory. But it's an option. You can certainly try that to mitigate some of the vaccine effects. Sometimes they will work.
Cool.
But anyway, so back to the 5 things, and I know it's like this is the end of your long weekend, and
so 5 things that are toxic to our pets, I'm going to bet are toxic to us too.
Say that again.
5 things that are going to be toxic to our pets, I'm going to bet are going to be toxic to us as well.
They usually are. And this is just a very short list. Okay.
Hey, you can give us more than 5. I'll start making a list.
Okay. All right. Well, we can do this together, because the first thing I always think of course, is, and we've been discussing it, is vaccines or any kind of pharma. Any kind of pharma that's, or, heartworm not medication, it's a pesticide, flea and tick pesticide, any of those things that you can eliminate, do it, because that's really actually an easy thing. Really, y'all have such good access to people with experience like us and other people out there, that there's no reason in the world where those kinds of things can't be like severely limited in your life, really, right? I mean, that's the blessing of having, age that we have. We have lots of experience, and we've been able, to teach, like you say, a lot of people.
That's why we don't ever get to retire.
I know, right? This is why we like to educate too.
Because I'd like to retire someday.
I know, I say that too. I'd like to actually work myself out of a job. I'd like to, right? So that the animals were so healthy that we just didn't have anything to do, Judy. You and I would
be awesome.
Anyway, okay, so there's that. That's a given. The other thing, of course, is food. Really spend your money instead of on all the drugs and stuff and all the veterinary visits. I mean, I can guarantee you, cross my heart, that you will not have the kind of veterinary bills, except for the fun ones, going to see Judy, or not anymore, but, me. You will not have that if you eliminate many of those toxicants that are started early in their animal's life. You will be able to spend that money on really awesome food, especially if it's locally grown food, grass-fed, if you're feeding a raw food or a fresh food. I call it a fresh food diet, because you and I still cook. We cook some of the meals, right?
I cook some, I grind some, and now I
Yeah.
have this humongous vegetable garden that I am pulling things out of for the
I'm
dogs.
jealous. Oh my
Actually,
God.
the chickens are benefiting the most right now because they're getting all kinds of greens. But yeah,
Sweet. Yeah, they're going to be good. Um, so then you'll be able to spend that kind of money on, and you'll be able to really support your community of growers. And that's what you want to be able to do, right? Keep the money in the community, support those people that have that commitment to health, to sustainability, to regenerative ag like you do. And that's what I call really, I always have this expression, you vote with at the booth, you vote with your feet, you vote with your money. And if you really want a sustainable life and a life that is based on natural medicine and not supporting what pharma is doing, then you support the community and you purchase things from those people that are basically putting their blood, sweat, and tears into providing those kinds of nutrients, those kinds of foods. And that's what we give our animals, right? Because it's no different than us. So to me, those things are clean. If you clean that up, that's like going to make huge, those two things, get the pharma out and get the poor quality foods out. People always ask me, I'm sure they ask you, well, what kind of kibble can I get? Well, you're on a slippery slope there because you're still never, even there's a few companies that aren't doing GMO. And that, so hopefully there's no glyphosate in there, but it's still a processed food. So the more that you can do your own, and Judy, your books have made it so easy. I love them. You've made it so easy. In fact, today after we get done, I've been cooking for 35 years too, or feeding fresh food. And so today I've got Sunday, got to make the food for the dogs. So, so it's not that difficult once you get into it, right? It's just not. And your books have made it so easy. Really, they're beautiful. I love them. The other thing is toys, any kind of toys that, especially these toys that have plastic in them, they're full of phthalates. Many of them, like the red ones in particular, just remember those kids' toys that had red from China, had red and lead. They still do with animals. So getting rid of those can be pretty easy and even though that's a great way to entertain your young dog by putting treats in there, peanut butter, and they're chewing on it, trying to get that out. Another way of doing that is to get a big marrow bone, scooping it out and, putting your peanut, whatever you want in there. Because really those things, once they start to crunch on them, they're releasing the phthalates and they're releasing the lead. Tennis balls have a lot of arsenic in them. I know that's not a very nice thing. People really love balls for their dogs.
I hate tennis balls ever since I took the fuzz out of a 10-week-old Irish setter who ate all the fuzz off of it and got a really nice impaction.
Ooh.
No tennis balls. That was my first year out of school.
Oh my God. Yeah. Get rid of those. So there's another good reason. And then it had arsenic there too. So that's good.
They're actually, so somebody's saying, oh no, toys. There are some companies out there now that actually are sourcing using like organic fibers and, not using any dyes. Everything is food grade. So there are companies that are doing that sort of sourcing. And I think if you put in a search engine, safe toys for dogs, chemical free, organic, something like that, you can find them. I cannot remember the name, but I did see a couple of companies. I think it's Super Zoo, and then at another expo I was at, there are a couple of companies out there doing that. So there are some good ones out there. Somebody says coconut husk toys. So look for things that are more natural.
Right, and the rope material that you can throw, and there's lots out there. Just don't get stuck.
But do your research. Yeah,
do your research. The other thing, of course, that gets me, of course, is bedding. And one of the things I saw this great case, it's been some time, I think it's probably been about 10 years ago, but Tempur-Pedic type beds, the memory foam, I guess I shouldn't say the name of that company because memory foam is everywhere now. But I had some clients in Chicago, and they had a big king size bed, husband and wife, and two rescued poodles, standard poodles. and everybody had hypothyroidism. And they were both, the husband and wife were being treated by a homeopath, and the dogs would be treated by me. And we were just like struggling through it. And it was more than 10 years ago. I didn't understand that memory foam did this, but memory foam releases a lot of bromates, which compete on the thyroid because it's a halogen, which Judy and I know. And so it'll compete for the iodine receptors on the thyroid. So the iodine isn't able to lodge on the thyroid and then create our T4 hormone. So it knocks it off there. It doesn't allow it to be there. So consequently, you have tendency towards hypothyroidism. And this gal had read something. She got rid of that memory foam bed. Everybody in the family corrected easily. The husband took longer, but everybody corrected very quickly. And so I see a lot of these beds out there that have this memory foam. And if your dog is spending a lot of time, on your bed or on a bed or on a couch, that's another source, of course, of fire retardants and often phthalates, depending on what the material is, if it's kind of a plasticky material, microfiber and stuff like that. So unfortunately, there's so much in the household, that can be cleaned up, that the animals are exposed to. But one of the other things, probably fifth on my list, if I could say it, is EMFs and Wi-Fi, because especially if you're leaving the house. Now, I know a lot of people have been using a lot of Wi-Fi in their houses these days, right? Because nobody's leaving. But at the very least, I really recommend shutting it off at night. That's not a difficult thing to do. Some people have figured out even how to shut off all the electricity of their house. And if you're living in an apartment, you can get a lot of cross-contamination of non-native EMF into your home. If you're sleeping in a bed that your neighbor has the Wi-Fi router close by, right close by your bed, you can be contaminated yourself and your animals. Using, these electromagnetic, talking on your cell phone, that, and with your dog right there. Cell phones are one of the worst. Also the handheld portable telephones that we love, we're talking on the phone, talking to our mom, chopping vegetables, those are really high in EMFs. So anything we can do to kind of eliminate these really affect the immune system. They do a lot of different things, but as 5G is rolling out a lot of communities, there's a lot of huge fears about this contamination that can get worse and worse. And some people are even talking about Wi-Fi getting worse during, right before the pandemic and then during the pandemic, because they're actually putting up towers while we're in our homes, not really watching what's going on. So the studies around Wi-Fi have been around for decades, for 40, 50 years, but the information to the public has not been out there. So those are just, those are just a few things that I'd recommend that need to get, looked at immediately.
I'm going to add another to the list, which is household cleaners.
Absolutely.
Falls under the chemicals. What do you recommend for if somebody wanted to use a natural cleaner?
Well, always just nice vinegar. If you've got, I think Bonner's has some nice products. What's that called? I use it called Sol, Safe Sol. No, I can't think of the name of it. SAL. And it's a nice detergent, comes in their big Bonner, those big containers, not very expensive at all. And you can find it at any of the grocery stores. And that's a really nice cleaner that's just super simple. Of course, any kind of thing with lemon juice in it and vinegar are really simple. This more simple, the better, right? You don't have to, and plus you just save a whole bunch of money. The other thing that also can be very toxic to animals is these fragrance emitters, right? I mean, it wigs out a lot of animals. Some of them just, and you can imagine, right? Because the brain of a dog is far more developed olfaction wise, right? We developed our frontal lobe a lot more. They've really maintained. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so if you think about that, plus a lot of those have petrochemical bases. So if you're around somebody that's wearing heavy fragrances, often the reason you can smell it and you feel like you're assaulted is because they're petrochemical bases and they stay, they don't go away. So no, that's a really, really big one. That's a big one.
Interestingly, I had a client who she smoked, and so she wore a lot of perfume. And her dog actually died of a sinus cancer. And we struggled for probably 5 years with that dog with nasal discharge, inflammation,
Yes.
chronic
Yes.
infection. And, it was just so obvious to me and to the staff, but it was one of those conversations that just wasn't going to get us. I mean, between the cigarette smoke and the
Yes.
really heavy perfume, it was kind of, oh, yeah, I know
Yeah.
exactly what's causing this, and I know that I can't
Do anything about it.
change that.
And
And
that's the other thing, cigarette smoke, that's secondary, right? The cadmium, the heavy metals. And of course, around here, the other thing is, and in the West, more particular, we have a lot of fires. So that 2.5 particulate matter that's emitted, and then when you or a household fire, I mean, you can imagine if you look around your house, if all of that burned, all of those plastics, all of those, I mean, these are the things that we are now dealing with.
yeah,
That train that derailed recently, I forgot where it was, and they had to evacuate the community. I mean, these are what our animals are, right? And so anything that has to be inhaled has to be processed as well. So, but obviously you're not going to have a train derailing in your house, but you can have some of these chemicals that are really
no, but where we lived in New Jersey, the like 2 towns over, a train derailed, all full of chemicals, and I mean they evacuated everybody. And if you stayed home, you had to close everything up because the toxic fume cloud that was overlying the community was not good news. And of course, part of it landed in the waterway, so then we had
right,
waterway contamination. I mean, just
right,
whoa,
yeah.
bad news. So,
bad one.
Dr. Mercola has EMF protection products, somebody says. So,
Yeah, there's a lot
yeah,
of
I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that you can use to try to start putting some protections in place. And I'm one of those people, I'm never going to have a smart home with
me
all these
either.
things. First of all, I'm not
Me
smart
either.
enough to work a smart home.
Right.
But second of all, I don't need all that electronic
No.
stuff in my house. The house that we're building, I'm trying to make it look like sort of almost the Green Acres farmhouse. Like, how can we make this look as down to earth and,
That's nice.
just, I want it to be country farm. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we're building. We're building
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
oasis without a bunch of wires and stuff.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So,
That's awesome.
grow your own food, folks. You can go organic.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, and I have one other thing. Just reminded me. I have a new blog coming up and it'll have a whole bunch of this on there.
Cool.
But mold. This is, reminding me about houses. This is a real problem that I think veterinarians, it's hard for most veterinarians to recognize mold poisoning. And it's epidemic in humans again. Much of it, I think, even in New Mexico, where it's really dry and high here, we're at like 8,000 feet, they're very dry, but we still have tons of mold. Yeah. So of course, the animals, if you're living in a house that has any kind of mold, or you're having issues with your lungs that nobody can figure out, I strongly suggest you find a functional practitioner or a naturopath or somebody who knows how to do mold testing.
Yeah.
And it's obscure. It's as weird as treating Lyme disease and everything else. I've gone through this with my partner. He had mold exposure from an office he was in. So it's not fun.
Yeah, we had that in a local school in New Jersey. They had a terrible mold problem. And one of my technicians, her younger brother, developed a meningitis from the mold, had to have a shunt put in to drain the fluid off of his brain. I mean, it was a nightmare. School was closed down. A bunch of the kids were sick. Terrible,
Yep.
terrible, terrible.
And it's not just the mold, it's the toxins the mold produce.
It's the mold toxins. So it's sort of like when we talk about the aflatoxins in
Yes.
grains that are going into pet food. So it's not the mold itself, it's the toxin release from the mold that is causing the liver problems. And frankly, I think that over my years of practice, an awful lot of the elevated liver enzymes that I saw in animals were due to aflatoxin molds from bad food. And it's not tested for, like, you know, it's supposed to be, but it's not. So anyway, Dee, we could talk for like ever.
I know.
But for those who want to get in touch with her, it's drdeblanco.com, DRDEEBLANCO.com. And that was in the posting for the summit originally. When you got your email and everything, it should have the bios of all of our speakers with their contact information. I think she's very, very helpful. And sorry, Dee, but your inbox might get a little overrun.
That's okay.
She says it's okay.
I've got good help. Thank you. I'm happy to help, right? We love helping people, right, Judy?
Well, that's the goal. That's why we're doing the summit.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I love it.
All right, everyone. For those of you who are still with us, we will be back at 7 o'clock tonight. It wasn't on the original list, but it's our chronic digestive disorders in pets that was supposed to be last night with Dr. Holly Gans from Animal Biome. She's a microbiologist. So we will be back at 7 p.m. to finish it off. I don't know. I might have a martini in my hand for that one because it's a long weekend.
Good for you.
And I'm pretty sure that martini is not part of my overall perfect health. But we all have at least one vice. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think we do.
I think that's my one. I don't eat sweets. I don't like them.
Oh, you're lucky. Oh, that's good.
I know. So, all right, everyone. See you later. Dee, thank you. You're the best. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Love you. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.